Fantastic. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming along today. My name is James Dunn. I'm the Senior Officer for Age Friendly Northeast Victoria, and we're based in the Upper Hume Primary Care Partnership. So before we start properly, I just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting on today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And we're from all different parts of the state today, which is fantastic. So we're on many different lands of many different peoples. So I'm on the lands of the Bangarang Yorta Yorta people here in Wangaratta. And so, as I said, I pay my respects to elders past and present and acknowledge their ongoing and unbroken connection to the land. So we've all come here today on that theme of connection and what it means to connect and what it means to make contributions to our communities. And I think this is something that we all want to do no matter what age we are. And our session today is really looking at what connection and participation looks like as we age. We've got 4 fantastic speakers today from various parts of the state who are going to unpack this meaning of connection and participation and what that looks like in their work. And I think the most exciting thing about these projects, having had the chance to speak to everyone prior to while I was organising the event, is that it really starts to expand our idea of connection and participation and what that means. I think it's sometimes really easy to think of connection in the sense of, in a really narrow way of people coming together, maybe sitting around a table somewhere, sharing a cup of tea, that sort of thing. But what I think these projects show today is that connection and participation come in many different forms, be that online, being for a particular cause, doing it across generations and doing it in the service of continuing culture and those sorts of things. So I'm not going to say too much further about participation and connection because I think our speakers are really going to do a fantastic job of exploring that in further detail. But the format for today's session is that we'll have 2 presentations at the start. We'll take a 5-minute stretch break and just give you a chance to get a glass of water or a cup of tea or something like that. And then we'll come back and have 2 further presentations. And if we've got time, we might do a little facilitated panel at the end. So each presenter is going to have about 10 minutes to present on their project, and there'll be time for questions at the end. But if something sort of comes to your mind throughout the presentation that you just want to get down, please feel free to use the chat and just drop it into the chat there, and we'll try and circle back to that at the end of the presentation and explore that in a bit more detail. So without further delay, I'm going to hand over to Nikki Efstriato, who is the Community Connections Project Coordinator at Moorabool Shire Council. And Nikki's going to be discussing digital inclusion for older people. Nikki.
Thank you very much, James, for inviting me here today to talk about a very important topic, community connections and social participation. And I'm sure we've all been challenged in the last couple of years in this space, particularly looking at the impact on our local communities of the COVID restrictions, etc. And obviously has made us all think differently about how we facilitate connections in our communities. And certainly that's been a test for us at Moorabool Shire. But we've also found that with all the sort of challenges, we've also had some great successes. So that's, I guess, what I wanted to speak to you all about today. So I'm going to share my screen with you all. Okay. Excellent. So I'm here to speak about digital inclusion. So in March 2020, all of our face-to-face programs at Moorabool Shire were suspended, and particularly our social support program, where we were supporting over 50 older people. And most of our social support program was face-to-face group activities, and we also had some sort of individual social support as well. So basically, the sort of March 2020 program suspension really caused us to think about how we're actually going to continue our connections with this very vulnerable group. So we secured some funding from Working for Victoria to deliver the project between July and December 2020. And the main purpose was to actually set up a virtual social support program. So I was actually employed. I still continue to be the Community Connections Project Coordinator. So we secured funding to employ myself from Working for Victoria, but we also used our service funding to actually purchase computer devices. So obviously the Commonwealth at the time was making the funding available to all services to see how they can actually connect their clients to virtual social support. So we purchased 40 devices, and our Moorabool IT service essentially assisted us to purchase those devices, install and manage the software, which included Google, Gmail, Solitaire, a camera and Zoom. So I guess the elements of the project included providing our clients and carers with tablet devices, with software and internet access. So most of our clients at the time did not have access to any tablet or internet devices. So we had to provide that hardware. The project involved providing one-to-one client carer training and support. So obviously at the time, I had to go into people's homes with full PPE gear and deliver the devices and also show clients how to use them. The project included training and supporting staff to deliver a social support program. So interestingly enough, most of our social support staff were not very confident with using computers. So they were actually quite overwhelmed at the prospect of having to change the way they work and deliver this project. So the program involved us actually delivering up to 2 virtual activities each day, particularly during the restrictions. So we had a monthly calendar and we delivered two virtual activities a day. So I also created client staff how-to booklets. So obviously clients, needed support resources on how to connect with their device, in case they forgot. And also I developed those resources for the staff, which I have circulated in the sector and I think have been useful to other programs who are trying to set up virtual social support projects. So the program also involved connecting clients to their family and friends. So it wasn't just about connecting them to our service, it was about connecting them to family and friends. And there was an element of also improving their digital literacy. So, whether it was with myself, providing that one-to-one support to clients, it was also our staff, once they received the training and support to deliver this project, they were also improving the skills of our clients. So just to give you a perspective of, I guess, our clients, all of our clients were part of the Commonwealth Home Support Program and the HACC PYP program. So we obviously couldn't deliver this program to individuals outside of this criteria. So most of our clients were between the ages of 77 and 91 years of age. Over half were women and most of them lived alone. We have a large number of clients who actually don't have contact with their family. Many family members are either interstate or live far away. And many of our clients actually have very few personal connections, and that's essentially why they actually use our service. So many of our clients are also affected by some form of disability, such as dementia or chronic health issue. Most of our clients don't drive, and as I said before, many did not have smartphones or devices, and many had low digital literacy. And those individuals, I guess, who did have access to some sort of device that was purchased by their family members, required significant assistance to actually use those devices. So what we found is even those who had devices didn't actually know how to use them. So as you can imagine, initially when I first came on to this project, I was a little bit concerned about how I was going to essentially set up this project and get people online. Essentially, I will say that most of our clients were not interested. I spent the first couple of weeks coming onto this project, calling people up and asking them if they're actually interested. And I would say that most said they weren't interested. They were a little bit overwhelmed about the thought of using technology, and they didn't think that they could manage it, and they didn't also feel that there were many benefits. But being the persistent person that I am, I didn't sort of accept no for an answer. And delighted to report that we actually had, at that time during COVID restrictions, up to 42 clients participate. So that was out of sort of 55, 60 clients that we had on our books. So, it was a fantastic result. But we did have some challenges initially, and most of that was even just encouraging, I guess, clients to give it a go. I guess confirming that we'll be supporting them throughout the whole process. So fortunately, it worked really well because we did deliver a fantastic virtual social support program. So most of our program delivery was group virtual activities. So as I said before, we delivered 2 per day. So we had lots of different activities. We had chat and coffee sessions. We had bingo, trivia, word games. Virtual tours were very, very popular. I think most of our programs, we averaged between 6 to 9 people. But when we when we had external speakers or virtual tours, we could have up to 20 people online at a time, which was fantastic. We had school students involved, sharing their stories, facilitating discussions with our clients. We had our tourism officer, showing virtual tours of Moorabool Shire. Anything related to history or local history was very, very popular. We also would actually use the Zoom platform as an opportunity to show people how to use Google and YouTube, which was also very popular. We would share our screen and then just, show people how to use those programs. We had many clients actually sharing their stories and photographs, which is a really wonderful way of interacting with clients and encouraging them, I guess, to feel confident to speak on screen, which there was a lot of trepidation initially. And then we would also have things like virtual concerts with live entertainers, and we had a virtual end of year party, which worked really well. So we initially obviously started delivering this program, just during the sort of COVID restrictions, but now the virtual social support program is an ongoing feature of our regular program. So we do obviously deliver face-to-face activities when we've been able to, but we also actually deliver group virtual activities. And one of the other things I did is actually set up individual clients who had known each other for years on group chats, which also worked really, really well. So in addition to the group activities, there was probably more interest in, I guess, supporting individuals to connect with their families. As I said before, people were not interested, people were scared, but I think it really helped me going into people's homes, being able to, I guess, assess, what their needs are, what their preferences were, did they need to connect with family and friends, or were they more interested in connecting to our program? So what I did find was that most of our clients were first and foremost interested in connecting with their families. And that's exactly what I did in terms of, setting up the Zoom platform for them. I should point out that probably a main part of the success of the project was that I had already set up people's devices before I went to their homes. So I set up email addresses, Zoom accounts, etc. And I would go to people's houses and literally demonstrate how easy it was to actually use Zoom. So I should point out that I set up contacts for each of our clients, and it was just so much easier rather than people going through an email to actually join a meeting. So I set it up so a video call would go straight to their devices, and clients, all they had to do was initially just accept the call. And I think this was a huge part of why many people gave it a go, because I just made it initially very, very basic and very easy. And it was fantastic because families could also, call clients, and all they had to do was essentially have their devices charged and also accept a call. So we also initially, we had a lot of individuals who didn't participate in the group Zoom activities, but then when word spread, they would actually call us up and say they wanted to participate. So word of mouth was a brilliant way of getting people connected. And as I said before, it helped that I assessed, individual needs. And I think the biggest draw card was that I could connect them with their children and their grandchildren, which I think probably was, really powerful, that we had a lot of people's grandchildren actually call them regularly. So they were able to actually have that regular support and engagement. And, many continue to still have that. So we also, I guess, set up regular one-to-one Zoom sessions between staff and clients, because we also found that sometimes individuals just didn't feel like always interacting in a group. So that was also very useful, I think, for the staff to just keep their eye on clients and make sure they're supported, and for clients to also feel that they are connected. So in addition, I guess, to setting up the Zoom platform, once actually people felt comfortable with using their devices and felt comfortable with being on a video camera, we were able to teach them lots of different skills. Google and YouTube was very, very popular with all of our clients. It opened up a whole new world for everyone. I also taught many people how to use the voice technology, found that some of our clients felt challenged by sort of using the keyboard and typing in things. So I taught them how to use the voice feature, which was also very easy and very popular. I also set up the Victorian Emergency app for some of our residents, particularly who are living in rural areas. And again, this is what they felt that they needed, how they communicated to me. So that was very useful for them to actually receive up-to-date information. And I think many of those clients also initially, once they saw the benefits of using this app, they were very much interested in using, different other features as well. Some of our clients also were disconnected from their churches, so I set up online church streaming services or showed them how to actually access that, which was, really, really, successful in, keeping people engaged with their local community. Now, there were a few people who were interested in Facebook and Instagram, and that was mainly due to the fact that their children or grandchildren were using these programs. But admittedly, most of the individuals who'd never used, computers before weren't so much interested in Facebook and Instagram. And that's mainly because they were just more interested in the sort of Google, YouTube, and then the Zoom video chat platform. So the feedback from residents was very positive. Many people talked about how, I guess, our program, broke up the loneliness, gave them something to look forward to. Some people said that it kept them sane during COVID. Many people were, very interested to hear about other people's experiences and stories. Some people talked about how they felt depressed and in physical pain, and the contact made them feel better. Some people were petrified, being online, but it's brought me out of my shell. So we received lots of lovely compliments and positive comments from people, particularly who had great reservations about actually going online. So I guess we've learnt a lot from delivering this program. So we've also, looking at how we can build the capacity of the local community to deliver digital inclusion projects to our community. So our library, deliver one-to-one sessions to assist many of our residents with using their devices. Now, this program was set up actually before COVID restrictions and was very popular. But we also have a borrowing device scheme in our library. So obviously many of our older residents don't actually have devices, so they can actually borrow them from our libraries. They're assisted in that one-to-one support with setting up their devices. Many people come because they've just purchased an iPad or a device and they need assistance with the setup. We have been connecting individuals to the Be Connected portal so they can learn how to use their devices at their own pace. Our volunteer provides assistance with, talking people through their technical issues, and probably what we've been inundated with is providing assistance with the setup of MyGov accounts and facilitating access to digital certificates. What we learned, again, there were lots of learnings with this project. So we felt that, one of the most important things for anyone to think about when it comes to digital inclusion is that the physical device needs to be easy and very accessible. We had some challenges. For example, initially our IT team set up or installed hard covers on all of our Samsung Galaxy devices, which did not work as people struggled with the on and off button. Very simple thing. I removed them all, replaced them with soft covers, and everyone, was able to manage the on and off button. These sorts of things actually make an enormous difference. With our program, we installed remote control software. So it enabled our staff to actually go into people's devices and assist them to get online. Now, we felt that that was necessary for our client group, but that's by no means necessary for everyone to use this software, but it did really make a difference in getting people online when they were feeling very stressed. So we found that obviously, most of our clients were new to technology, so we made it as easy as possible. I think when I initially met with clients, I said to them, we're just going to get you on Zoom to connect with us and your families. And we really, supported clients through using Zoom for a couple of months before they were, we introduced them to any other, Google or YouTube or email features. We found that that was really instrumental in getting people confident with using the technology. So we also found that typing was very difficult for a lot of our clients. So voice technology was, made it so much easier for people to access Google and YouTube and other programs. We also found that individuals have very different skills and abilities, and we needed to adapt learning programs to meet their needs. We also found that during COVID, people had increased their digital literacy, but we found that also once we resumed our face-to-face programs, people actually forgot how to use their devices. So obviously the last couple of months that we've suspended our face-to-face programs due to COVID, we've had to teach, a lot of those skills that were lost. But it's still working really well in terms of people being able to connect online. But I think incorporating digital literacy is really important, in incorporating that in your face-to-face programs, and that's certainly something that we have started to do. So I also found that a lot of our clients did say to me that they felt this enormous sense of achievement of actually being managing to get online. Many of the families I initially spoke to didn't actually feel confident that their parents would be able to get online. So there was, a lot of sort of low expectations I found, and when people actually managed to get online, they really felt that, they weren't too old to learn new things. So there was enormous sense of achievement. What we also found is that people were very isolated even before COVID. So many of our clients never had, a lot of contact with their families because they were living interstate or in Melbourne. So they were isolated even before COVID. So, it's made us think about how we can use, I guess, virtual social support, to connect people who are at risk of loneliness. So the next steps, we will continue to deliver virtual social support. Interesting thing is, before COVID, we would only offer face-to-face activities, but now we actually offer virtual social support. So clients do not have to come to our face-to-face programs. They can either have one-to-one social support, or they can just borrow the devices and be supported to connect to their families, which is also very popular. And we do have, I guess, probably more and more interest in the last year of people just borrowing the devices and being connected to their families. So our libraries are continuing to lend devices and deliver one-to-one tech support to the community. Can't emphasise enough the need for that one-to-one problem-solving support. Many of our participants did say that they find it very difficult to follow group learning programs. So particularly with our recent, consultation with our community for the Age Well, Live Well strategy, we are going to be, I guess, building the capacity of local organisations to deliver, online support to the 50 plus cohort. So we're actually talking with some of our local organisations, how we can extend that telephone support to include virtual support. We still have a bit of work to do in terms of delivering, I guess, computer literacy programs with our 50 plus groups. What we found is actually many of the members of our groups actually are not confident in using computers. So there's still a great need there, and there's still a role for us to play in council to facilitate that. So also we're looking at securing funding for digital literacy programs, because we do acknowledge that, I guess, with individuals who've never used technology before, that one-to-one support, may be sort of, very labour intensive. So with some different groups, funding is required. And we're also looking at how we can develop partnerships between schools and volunteer groups to deliver one-to-one training to learners. In the past, I've actually been involved in developing partnerships with schools and going into schools and students actually, I guess, teaching, older learners how to actually use their devices. So that's been really effective. So has anyone got any questions? I haven't even looked at the chat, but we can cover that later.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nikki. That was a really fantastic presentation. I think the emphasis that you've placed on the sustainability post that lockdown period, I think, is really important, because we held a forum on digital participation and digital inclusion last year in our region, and I think one of the factors that really was an issue is that people would get trained how to use Zoom or whatever. If you don't have that ongoing engagement with it, ongoing use of those skills, they drop off really, really quickly. So I think that emphasis you've had on the sustainability and looking for models, to keep people using those skills, but also providing that support is really, really critical. So I'm just a bit conscious of time. So if there are questions for Nikki, can I just ask everyone to put them in the chat, and perhaps Nikki, you could respond to them throughout the rest of the session. I think there are a couple of specific technical questions in there in there for you. So that should be a good start, I'm sure. So I'll now invite Darren Cunningham. Darren is the Positive Ageing Officer from Melton City Council, and his project is looking at connection through contribution. So Darren, I'll pass over to you.
Great, thanks James. Good morning everyone. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you about one of the projects that we started during lockdown in 2020. And I suppose the theme of mine is really that people can feel connection even when they are alone. So yeah, thanks to James for organising today's conversation. I think it's a great one. And yeah, just a chance for us to look at different ways of, creating connection amongst seniors. So like many councils, when lockdown started, we went into what do we do for seniors, particularly those that, would normally come to, our activities. And, we, like a lot of other councils, did things like sending activity packs home. So lots of crosswords and Sudokus and reading materials and all of those sorts of things. And we started, doing weekly welfare phone calls to check on people as well. And look, it didn't take long for seniors to start knocking back the activity packs and to start ignoring the phone calls that they would get, on certain days at particular times. They knew it was someone from council, and they quickly found they didn't have enough to talk about, so they started ignoring those phone calls. So my role at council is predominantly dealing with people, older people that are, out and about in the community, still fairly, reasonably to fairly independent. Some of them access services, but you don't need to, get an assessment or any of that to get involved in my program. So mine's more of a community development role than a service delivery. But a lot of the programs that I was leading at the time, a lot of exercise programs and others, they stopped, of course. So one of the things that, I had to do was, or wanted to do, was to look for programs that were not only going to give seniors something to do, but to give them something to do with real purpose. And so it was not long after the fires of the summer of 2019, 2020, when we were all hit by COVID. And when I was looking for, craft activities for seniors to perhaps get involved in, I kept coming across different animal charities that were, being inundated by, they might have put out a request for, pouches for little Joeys, that had been orphaned. But, through the power of, the internet and people wanting to do good, they were getting inundated with, with items that they no longer needed. It was becoming a problem for them. So one of the first things I did was to look for charities and contact them that, to make sure there was a need there. So I came across the Trauma Teddies project through the Australian Red Cross and contacted them and said, "Do you need more teddies?" And they said, "Yes, please." So we put out the feelers, calling for interest, and at that stage of the proceedings, we had about 80 people register their interest, and the Community Crafters project was off and running. So we started with that project, and what we did was we sent craft packs. So we sent craft packs home to people, sent them knitting needles if they needed them. And when they were done, when they were ready to have them picked up, we had staff go in and pick up those items. And over the sort of the preceding months, we ended up with at that first round 475 trauma teddies, and we sent and we're still sending those to local. So instead of sending them into Red Cross Australia, sort of head office for them to distribute, we decided we wanted to send them out into the local community. So they went to the local SES, they went to a GP clinic, they went to Melton Health, they've gone to the local ambulance crews, and we continue to send them out. Probably by this stage, we'll have 600 trauma teddies have so far been made. So looking for our second project, I got in contact with Peter Mac Cancer Centre and asked them about what they needed, and they said that they really needed knee blankets. So they like to give out knee blankets to patients when they're getting their cancer treatments, something bright, something comforting for them. And when they finish their treatments, they also get to take the blankets home with them, which is a nice little bit of recognition. Thank you, Sophie. So that project was something I'm going to show you a video about now. We ended up at that stage of the project, about 160 knee blankets have gone to Peter Mac, and we're probably up around the 200 mark at the moment. So I'm going to show you a little video. So hopefully this all works beautifully for you. James will let me know. Is that come up, James?
That's come up. Yeah, I'll just say as well. So Darren's video is an amazing sort of overview of the people that participated in the project. But it is the kind of video you might want to have a box of tissues handy with. And it sort of deals with themes of terminal illness and loss. So if that's just a little bit too close to home, feel free just to step away, maybe turn off your screen for the next 3 minutes or so, and then we'll come back and finish off Darren's presentation. But yeah, that's come up now, Darren.
Lovely. All right. Thanks for that.
Now, just no sound. I don't know if there's any intro music.
There is some music there.
I think when you share the screen and share the video, you have to click include sound. There's this tick box at the bottom. So if you just unshare and then try sharing again.
All right. Clicking buttons all over the place. Unshare. Where are we there? Stop share. Beautiful.
Yeah, stop share.
And share screen.
I think it comes up in the bottom.
Maybe advanced sharing options.
Should be. No, if you click share screen and then it'll all your screens that you've got, and then
share sound. There we go.
Share sound. There you go.
Thank you for the IT support. So we will. How's that?
I'm the eldest of 5 girls, and Mum always knitted for us when we were kids. Always watched Mum, and then I started to knit myself.
And my grandmother taught me how to crochet, so it's one of her legacies to me.
I've been knitting since I don't know how long. My aunt taught me how to knit. We used to have races to see who could finish the ball first. She always won.
My passion is knitting, stitching, and learn new things.
It's a hobby. It's just like reading. I love to read as well. And other people, they paint or they draw.
But I used to do a lot of knitting, and then I sort of gave it all away and gave it up, and then I sort of started again, and then at the beginning of this year I gave it all away again, and then all of a sudden this project came up, and I thought, how wonderful.
And And of course, Melbourne was in lockdown at the time. And it was great having the project because you had a focus and it was for charity. So it also got your focus off being in lockdown, woe is me, to these other people who are in lockdown too, and they're also in need.
When the blankets come to us, our team of volunteers are very cautious in sorting those blankets. They're often packed onto a trolley and we take them upstairs into our day chemotherapy unit where they provide comfort and warmth to a lot of the patients, and it's almost their keepsake during their treatment. And it is very, very obvious that every stitch has been done with a thought of where those blankets will end up and who they will be supporting.
I think regardless of where you are in the hospital or why you're here, it says someone is thinking of you, and I think to know that you are heard and that you're validated and that your experience is understood by someone else is a really lovely feeling.
It's my pleasure. I'm very happy if some patient can use my blanket.
I hope this helps you. I hope when you're at hospital, your treatment works and you actually get better.
I just hope they really, really, really enjoy the blanket and it brings them joy. Sorry.
Debbie had received a beautiful blanket from the volunteers, and I'm just speaking on her behalf because she wanted me just to let you know that how appreciative she was of receiving the blanket and how very special the volunteers are, because they do a fantastic job for all the hospital.
I'm very, very blessed to have this palliative care ward. Thank you so, so much.
So there we go. That's our community crafters project, or one of the projects within that. We ended up doing 4 projects during lockdown. The other 2 that we did were for Indigenous families in need. So we did items that were all in the black, red and yellow of the Indigenous flag, and also for women and children fleeing family violence. So that we did those last 2 for a group called KOGO, K-O-G-O. They're a charity called Knit One, Give One, and they will take your items and distribute them out to people in need. We ended up giving them, I think, 72 bags of items. We've probably got about another 20 bags worth at the moment. And yeah, it was a really, really impactful, impactful project. One of the ladies that really stood out to me, we ended up with 160 crafters, 165 crafters in the program. And one of the ladies was going through a really, really difficult time in terms of some family violence issues. And she hadn't crafted for years. She heard about this project. She was feeling especially isolated at home, going through COVID, going through the other issues she was dealing with. And she got involved in the project, and most crafters with the teddy bears did 2 teddy bears. We gave them enough stuffing and yarn for that. And it was a great distraction for her. She ended up knitting 15 of the teddy bears, and she would sit them on her coffee table at home. And she said they were bringing joy into her life, even in her really darkest moments, when a couple of times police were called and had to come to her house and support her. And she said the police would walk in and their eyes would sort of gravitate straight to these teddy bears on her coffee table, and what are they for? And she talked to them about the trauma teddies, and that brought real joy to her and real solace to her in a really difficult time. And just everybody that's been involved in the project's gotten a lot out of it. The staff, you know, that we were sending the bags home and collecting the finished items, you know, they were struggling through COVID professionally, personally at home. So for them to go and, you know, be able to have a chat to these seniors and hear a bit of their stories and also do a bit of a welfare check on them was just brilliant. It was just, you know, a great project in all sorts of ways. We also bought all of the items from a local craft shop, small business in Melton South. We ended up spending about $11,000 at that craft shop on the project. So I might stop there, James. I know we're already over time, and yeah, any questions, I'll be hanging around.
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, amazing project. Really, it's just so great to hear what was happening. And I think it was Jean in the video just said it's that, you know, that focus on somebody else, not yourself. Because I think for anyone who went through that Melbourne lockdown, and you know, obviously everyone across the state experienced that at different times as well, it was really hard to just sit there and you know, not be able to go out and see friends, family, whoever. Yeah, I think it's a really nice, really amazing way to feel connected to community by doing something else, and not necessarily ever seeing the people that will end up with the final products that you create, but you can still find this sense of connection through you know, that contribution and that sense of purpose as well. So I know there's a few comments in the chat there, which are really great, but does anybody have any questions for Darren, or even some more reflections? No, well, yeah, there's some really great comments in there, Darren. It's yeah, really, I think everyone's really appreciated the presentation. And just to share a personal anecdote, when I've got 2.5-year-old twins, and when they were born, we were in the women's hospital. My wife was there for about 5 nights, and we had some volunteers come around and give us a pack of knitted crocheted blankets and toys for the kids and that sort of thing. And just the impact of that, we couldn't believe that somebody would give us these, you know, these beautiful presents that they'd put so much time and care into for nothing. And my kids still have them today. So these sorts of contributions really go a long way, So we might just take a 5-minute, or let's do a 3-minute break, just because we're running a little bit behind. So we'll come back at 10:53 for our next 2 presenters. That's Lauren from Yarra City Council and Helen from Latrobe City Council. So yeah, we'll come back at 10:53, have a quick stretch, go a quick drink, and then we'll get back into it. We might make a start again, everyone. Sorry, Dan, I'll just take you off the spotlight. If I can do that. There we go. Yeah, we might make a start back, everyone. Before we get into the next round of presentations from Lauren and Helen, I just want to give a quick plug for the Age-Friendly Northeast Victoria newsletter that we'll be launching soon. So this is an online newsletter, and it will be, you know, be able to promote events like this and the other events that we have coming up. We'll be able to share things that are happening across the region in relation to age-friendly work and ageing, and hopefully use it as a bit of a space to look at some of the research that's coming out and do some commentary around that research. So Sophie, would you mind dropping a link to the newsletter sign up into the chat? Great. That's there. Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, so you can sign up there, and hopefully we'll look to get our first edition out in the next couple of weeks. And we'll pick up on some of the themes that we had at our previous event, which looked at climate change and ageing, and do a little bit of roundup of the research around there and some commentary on that. So we'll now move on to our next presenters. And our next presenter is Lauren Brooker, and Lauren comes from the Yarra City Council, and she's the coordinator for positive ageing. And the work that Lauren's been doing is working with seniors clubs in her local area and bringing an age-friendly domain to those seniors clubs. So I'll hand over to Lauren.
Thanks, James. Nice to see some familiar faces and names and some new ones as well. So welcome, everybody. And I'd like to start just by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that I'm working on today. That's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and acknowledging all the First Nations people of all the different lands that we're all tuning in from today all over Victoria. Now, I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and I will just walk you through some of our projects. 1 second. Is that sharing?
Yep, that's come up.
All right, beautiful. So this project started actually in about June last year, when groups were starting to return again in person. There were a few little hiccups in that transition back, but we were looking at how we could support them as they were returning from COVID. We have about over 20 seniors clubs that we support in the city of Yarra, and all with their own differences and of course some similarities as well. So I'm just going to be talking about that project, how we found direction in terms of what we were actually going to prioritize, because I'm like, as sure with all of you've only got so many resources and so many people to do some of that work. And so we just used a tool to do that. And I thought it might be relatable to people here to think about in terms of maybe your own actions or your own strategic plans that you're trying to incorporate. So I've tried to make it as universal as possible. So here's some people engaging with some of our seniors clubs. So it started in the second half of 2021. And we wanted to look at the ongoing issues that seniors groups had been having, but then how that actually paired up with the new challenges of operating in a post-COVID environment, which was mostly around changing restrictions, things that we'd never asked them to do before that we were now required, things that we'd normally give groups, cut them a lot of slack on, now we couldn't, because they were rules that we couldn't cut any slack on. So there was a number of changes as they were returning to me. So we took on a number of steps. So we started off with a research phase, and this project was supported by some placement students from the University of Melbourne who were doing their Masters of Social Work. Highly recommend getting some students on board to do something like this, because it is great to have as that unbiased person for the groups as well, someone that's not, the same person that administers their grant and they want to, buddy up to. So, and one of those students was overseas. So that was a lot of desktop research for her, conducting some engagement activities with all of the groups, whether that was in person or over the phone, with an interpreter if required, reviewing the way their evaluation, their engagement activities went. Then they came up with a key opportunities action plan, and then they made a final report to us and gave us a lot of work to do, which is a good thing. And so we wanted to use a tool to try to determine the driver that was making it either enabling the groups to connect or that was making it a lot harder for them to connect. And what we found with the students as well as with the groups, everyone wants to go straight to coming up with all these different solutions of all the things we could do to build connection. And because that's usually the fun stuff, like let's do bus trips every week and let's get community transport out there and do all that fun stuff. But we wanted to take it back a little bit and see where should we actually be focusing our time and our energy to have the greatest outcome. So we use an interrelationship diagraph, which I don't know how familiar people will be, but I'll show you it briefly. And it's a really effective tool we found to find what the drivers were for the connection or for the success of the groups. And you can apply it really to anything, and I'll tap into that later. So this is what the Diagraph looks like. And this is a basic one that the students had a look at. Now, I apologize if people are familiar with the tool, but I'll just briefly go through it. So around the circle, you would come up with the different themes or factors. So There's 3 here in the orange, purple and green. And these have been kind of built from the age-friendly domains from the World Health Organization's Age-Friendly Cities and Communities Guide, which I'm sure feature in all of your action plans and strategic plans. And what you do is you go around this circle and you look at each domain or each theme with the other. So you'd look at civic participation and governance and building and outdoor spaces and consider, is there a relationship between the two? And then, if yes, which one influences the other? And which one influences the other the most? And you have to pick one. You've got to pick a side. You can't be radical. You've got to, pick a side. So the students went around, looked and found civic participation has a greater effect on the building and outdoor spaces. Then they continue around the circle looking at civic participation against social participation, connection, and culture. So they've extended the domains to make them fit what the seniors groups were coming back with that was the most important. They've looked at which one influences the other, and they've come up civic participation and governance has a greater effect on social participation, right? And then finishing off the circle, looking at building and outdoor spaces against social participation. So really quickly here, you can see that the civic participation and governance piece was really driving the other areas. So while it would have been quick to go and focus on, social participation and all the events we're going to run, or building in outdoor spaces and how annoyed we are that the venue isn't as nice as we wish it was, if we focus here and our resources on the civic participation and governance, that's going to have the greatest effect for the work that we're going to put in. So, and we call them outies. So I'll go into that into the next slide. So then this next slide we're looking at, now this one's a little bit scary, so just don't freak out. So this one's a bit more chaotic. So this is when we're coming up with, well, what are we going to do about it? And this is a lot of these suggestions around the circle. These came from our seniors clubs when we were engaging them with an interpreter, and some over the phone, some in person, but we had a presence at each group. And then we went around these possible kind of strategies. Again, went around each single one. Obviously, I won't do that now, but comparing them all against each other, looking at where the relationship exists and which one affects the other the most greatly. So you can see here where our little highest thought bubbles are, those were the drivers. So we're basically looking here, and just like in the other slide, it's that civic participation and governance piece. So we're looking at, training for committees and members, and then joint meetings with all the different members together. So both of these had the greatest influence on all of the others. And so you go around and count them of which ones. We call them an outie, is when there's a line, there's an arrow exiting, and then an innie if there's an arrow coming in. So with these drivers, we decided that that's what we would create the action plan from, and that's what we would be focusing our time on. Now, it would have been very easy to go straight to, investigating the facilities. Obviously, that's still important, trying to get all the ovens upgraded and trying to get outings happening and things like that. And there will still be a place for that. But for the beginning, we want to get this stuff right, and that will in turn influence all these other areas. So what next? So how that informed our next step, the first thing we've been able to do is recruit some bicultural liaison officers to assist with those things. So rather than having an interpreter in, and I know this may or may not be relevant to different people's seniors groups, so rather than always having an interpreter in, paying their external fee, which is higher, and it's always a different interpreter, so they don't have any continuity, having a Yarra staff member that speaks both languages, is a member of that community, it lives in the area, that can assist them with those training around governance or around grants or around helping their club become more welcoming and age-friendly. And we recruited them in all of the community languages that the seniors club speak. Some were more difficult than others, but we've got there. And then we've got a joint event in late March, which will be the first one. So it's really led by Youth 3A. They're doing all the heavy lifting on that one. Council will have some presence, and it's kind of a reciprocal. They want to learn about how they can give feedback and influence change, and we want to learn what they'd like to do or what their priorities are. And so that will be attended by a couple of members from the different seniors clubs. So they'll all be invited to that, to all do something together rather than, siphon them off from each other. And then we've got another joint event. We're working on that at the moment, and that's going to be steered by the RAS team around that kind of information sharing, navigation, because there was a lot of questions that came up around that. And again, a big function of that event will be bringing the groups together, working with those bicultural liaison officers, because there's a number of languages represented. So we'll have those people on as well to support the groups. So just some possible ways you could use this approach. One would be an advisory committee. I did something like this week with my advisory committee. With the age-friendly city domains, with different areas in your strategy, with officers outside of age services, to get that buy-in about how influential their area might be, because often there's things outside of age services that you need to do to influence any change. Community groups, external stakeholders, you name it. So I'll show you very quickly what it might look like. This is one that I did with an advisory committee last week to try to get clear on what we wanted to achieve for the year ahead. So this was with our age-friendly city domains, which really, from the World Health Organization, which informs our strategic plan. So looking at these, with my advisory committee, we tweaked some of them because there were certain words that they didn't want social inclusion. They wanted like valuing diversity, so we teased that all out, and then looked at what the relationship was between these different domains, and where we wanted to focus our attention or our advocacy or the advice that we gave council accordingly. And yeah, it's a great activity for building consensus amongst a group. Great discussion, great discussions. You could probably write a PhD for any of those possible relationships. Yeah.
I'm on a presentation.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not sure if someone just cut out, but I'm nearly done anyway, so I'll just go to my next slide. So yeah, that's all from me. Thank you for your attention, and thanks for having me, James.
Thanks, Laura. That was really fantastic. I think it's a really it's really important to look at those sort of environmental factors and all those structural issues that might impact the groups operate. Because I think, as you said, it's sometimes really easy to jump to what activities do we want to do and how do we want to do it and all that sort of thing. But if you don't have the infrastructure to support that group, or you don't have the environment that supports that group to operate, then the programmatic side of things isn't going to be as effective. So I'll just put out, is there any questions or any reflections from the group? I think we've got, looks like Mark Silver, you've got a question, you've got a hand up there.
Oh, Lauren, that's a terrific presentation, and 10 points being a social worker for using social work students. I think it's a great way, because one thing that's missing, and I'm an old in-tooth person, is community development. I don't hear it anymore. Back in the Whitlam days, and when I was studying social work, community development was something that every council had a community development officer. This doesn't happen anymore. So the fact that you're building stronger communities, which is really what we're all about, especially in the regional areas, it's not happening. And so we're trying to recreate a viable village community through other means without actually creating a community. So that's one comment I wanted to make, because I think we shouldn't do it indirectly. We should do it directly. And secondly, I'm just wondering, I have a big interest in intergenerational programs, and I'm just wondering where that fitted into to the whole process, because that is a way of rebuilding the old village style communities where that happened naturally, but we have to recreate them.
Yeah, Mark, it's a shame my manager's on leave, who's the biggest asset-based community development junkie that you'll ever meet. So she'd love that comment. Yeah, so she's here in spirit, I'm sure. It's funny you say the intergenerational component, because that's actually a big thing that came up through our advisory committee, was that the attitudes of older people and all ages of people, and that more intergenerational activities would be a really good way of doing that. And I've actually got another student who's just left at the moment, and she's really interested in ageism. And her background's actually international development at university. So she's going to be doing a report on ageism. So there'll be two different projects. One's the kind of academic report writing, and then one is going to be an intergenerational initiative that she's going to start. It's going to be at a library where we already have a play group. And we also have different seniors clubs that meet. And I'm encouraging her to try to contact, schools. There's obviously a whole range of people in the middle. And what that initiative is going to be, I don't know. I think something creative where we're having people respect and learn from all the different age groups and inviting them along. But it's certainly a big thing that came up from our advisory committee, doing that tool, looking at which influences which. And that, that neighborliness we've kind of lost. Like, I think you see it done so well in other parts of the world, that neighborhood feel, and often we lose that. And, I'm sure everyone's got an anecdote here of having have experienced that in a small scale, and how valuable it is. One of my friends yesterday has been invited to sauce making with the nonna next door. So she's kind of experiencing that, how valuable that is. So we have it in micro amounts, and definitely keen to try and roll it out in a bigger way. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Lauren. And just looking at the chat here, there's lots of support for your comment there, Mark, around community development. And there was just a question for you, Lauren. Is there anywhere we could read a bit more about your work, or can people get in touch with you if they're keen to learn a little bit more?
Yeah, I'll put my email in the chat maybe, and happy to share all the work or report or anything.
Excellent. Well, thanks again. That was really fantastic. So we're going to move to our last speaker now, and it's Helen Taylor, and Helen comes from Latrobe City Council. And it's interesting, Helen's looking at clubs as well, but looking at clubs in a slightly different perspective from Lauren. So I'll pass over to Helen.
Thank you, James, much appreciated. Hi, everybody. So one thing I will add that will feed on from what Lauren has been saying is that what always amuses me is that there is a stigma attached to being old. There's also a stigma attached to being young. So they do have something in common. They've both got stigmas attached to them. We started a project a fair few years ago called Welcoming and Age Friendly. What it was based on was the fact that we knew had people in the community who weren't engaging, and we wanted to know why they weren't engaging. So we went about finding out by speaking to those people. We also wanted to identify what the barriers were to their engagement. Given that Latrobe has an absolute wealth of courage to go and visit a club, when they walked in the door was when the barriers started. They didn't feel welcome. There were cliques. If they attended more than once, they identified that there were cliques that were in there. They didn't know, well, they were ignored. They weren't even shown where the toilets were. So we then started trying to define what would make a club welcoming and age friendly. And we asked the questions, and we asked the questions of all different ability levels, but of people aged over 65. From that, we developed a list. We developed a list and started developing what we thought would be define a welcoming and age-friendly club. We then started to develop a toolkit based on our findings, and those findings were agreed to by the people that we'd interviewed. We then invited clubs and groups to come to an information session. And we invited them to become part of this Welcome and Age Friendly group. It was going to be an accreditation that they could have in the Latrobe Valley. It would be visual. We've got a large stickers that says Welcoming and Age Friendly. They can put it up on their front doors. We had clubs jump at the chance. We had 24 clubs and groups come through the first session. What we do is we give them a total toolkit. That total toolkit identifies what is required. It walks them through it. Down to the fact that identifying a welcoming officer in each club and group and what that welcoming officer's roles were, what people wanted when they first walked in the door, and that was to be heard about, and questioned about what are your interests, what's your likes, and be buddied up with somebody who the welcoming officer feels has those same interests as they've got. So there's some commonality between that person and a stranger to begin with when they walk in the door, or within the first hour, that they're shown where the facilities are, where the toilets are. They've also got a fee schedule that's visible and is known. There's no hidden costs associated with being part of that club or group. They've also got the capacity to pay weekly or fortnightly rather than an upfront fee. So all of these things were put in the kit. And what we did was, with the idea of making this project, and well, it's now ongoing, sustainable, we're saying we can't afford to continue to support this. So and we can't afford the effort of making sure that these people have passed their accreditation. So we married up to clubs and groups with the idea that it would be a peer review. So one club would audit another club when that club was ready to be audited, when they felt they were ready to gain accreditation. We said we would assist clubs and groups if it was required, but we got minimal calls for assistance. They fed off their peer group, so they helped each other, they assisted each other. Once we were notified of a peer outcome, we then got everybody together, and of the initial groups that went through, every one of them was accredited or gained accreditation. We then held a great big accreditation ceremony. We had the press there, we had everyone with their certificates, we had an amazing group of people who are incredibly proud of what they had achieved. Word then got out, and we had more clubs and groups coming and knocking on our door because council started promoting those welcoming and age-friendly clubs and groups. So it has been sustainable through peers, as in people have found out that this group's got that accreditation, we want that accreditation, so they've enrolled in the next course. We do spot audits, so we have got some, me being one of them, older staff members who will go and wanting to join a club or a group, and we'll make sure that they're still up at accreditation level. What we've also found now is that many of the clubs and groups are wanting to revisit it because they've now got people who are starting to become less physically able, and they're wanting now to include some of that physical ability level in that welcoming and age-friendly, part of that age-friendly. So it's not just about physical access, it's about what other games or things like that can we start providing, what other activities can we start providing. So the project is self-sustaining. We just have to really overview it. It has become known, and so people are wanting to engage and enjoy it, and become known for being welcoming and age-friendly. Everybody's proud of their welcoming and age-friendly bags that we give them. They're proud of the sticker that they've got on their front door. And the toolkits that we've got are quite often reviewed back on and reviewed. They're doing self-reviews without being asked to do self-reviews. Perhaps they've heard that we're doing audits, who knows? So they're keeping themselves up to date. The toolkit and everything that we developed is available to everybody. It's on the Seniors Online website, but I've also sent James the link. So I'm happy for that to be sent out. And anybody can use whatever parts of it that they like and adapt it to what their needs are. However, and there is a rider with this, the welcoming and age-friendly logo that we developed, we are keeping that logo. And we're keeping control of that logo. We're happy for other people to use it. However, it will have to be under an MOU with Latrobe City Council, because we want to retain the integrity of that brand. So ideally, if a person leaves Latrobe City and moves to Mildura and they see that brand on the door of a tennis club or of a senior sit centre, they know that when they walk in that door for the first time, there will be a welcoming officer there. They know that they'll be given a pack that lets them know what the programs are, what's on what day, how much everything costs. And it's that integrity that we're wanting to hold on to very strongly, so that the brand continues to have meaning. Very easy to do though. Welcome to have emails. And as I said, everybody is welcome to use any of the templates and access any of the templates and use them. It's just the brand that we are retaining purely because of that integrity issue. So that was me, and I've been racing to get through so that we've got some time for questions, and to all the panel members. But if anybody's got any questions, more than happy to take them.
Thanks so much, Helen. I think you've just come back. Your screen was a bit frozen there, but it looks like you're back in moving now. I just want to confirm that link, is that the Welcoming Age Friendly project that's on Seniors Online?
Yep.
Great. I'll just drop that in the chat now. Does anyone have any questions for Helen? I think this, this idea that you had, Helen, is really fantastic, and it's really, it's really interesting to see the specific things that clubs need to do to be age friendly. I think this, we talk more generally about this framework and creating age friendly communities, but I think getting down to a club and making those really specific things, like having a welcoming person, having a buddy, actually being shown where the toilets are. These are really, it demonstrates these are really, really simple things that sometimes we just sort of take for granted or just don't really consider too much, but it actually makes a really significant difference and makes what could turn into be a not a great experience into a really fantastic one, and keeps that membership of the clubs going. So I think it's a really, really fantastic idea.
If I might add to that, what we've also done is we have made it so that our regional assessment service knows of what we do, and if they come across isolated community members, they will do a referral for social support individual for five weeks, and that's a worker assisting a person to go to one of the welcoming and age friendly clubs for 5 weeks, supporting them to attend, so that they don't have to do it by themselves. They've got somebody there with them. And we know that those clubs and groups will support that person to continue to attend.
Great. I think that's a great way of looking at the other side of the coin, as well as supporting people to engage with those clubs if that's what they're interested in. So we are just getting towards the end of the session, and I didn't want to cut off the panelists and try and shorten the presentations because they were all so fantastic. So we probably won't have time for a panel, but I do just want to invite any last reflections or thoughts on either Helen's presentation or just more generally, or any questions that people might have. Feel free just to drop that in the chat. Lots of positive comments overall about the presentations, but I think Tanya Hall has one for Helen. She's asking about the grant funding and where the 80,000 grant funding came from.
So we initially got that funded by the Department of Health and Human Services via the Commissioner for Senior Victorians, and that was part of an engagement project for older people. if I can say though, the majority of that money was actually in the consultation, used in the consultation process and developing the tools. So, and they're now available.
Excellent. So everything should be in that link that I posted just before to Helen's project. So I'll wrap up now because I don't want to keep us too long, and the speakers, all our panelists have been so kind in giving up their time already. But I think the takeaway for me from our discussions today was that social connection, it comes in so many forms. We saw with Nikki and Darren's projects that this sense of connection can come through online and having the tools and skills to keep your real life relationships going, or even establish new relationships in the digital world. And with Darren's project, as I mentioned, it's that sense of purpose and feeling like you can make a contribution back to your community. So you feel part of that community, even if you're locked down and isolated in your home during COVID. And when we look at Helen and Lauren's projects, we can see the role that local governments play in addressing some of those structural issues that might mean that people feel excluded or don't feel like they can participate in their communities as much, whether it's keeping seniors groups going and work out how they can actually be sustainable and what needs to happen to make that sustainability happen. Or in Helen's case, with those with the groups and just making those slight tweaks to the way that groups operate, means that they're inclusive for everyone, no matter what age they might be. So I just want to again thank all the speakers today for their time that they've given up in putting their presentations together. Having been on the other side and doing these sorts of presentations, I know it's not just a 15-minute sort of thing that you turn up and put some slides on the screen. There's work that goes in behind this to put a fantastic speech together. So I really appreciate all that work. And I also just want to give a big thanks to Jan Bruce at the MAV for helping me get in touch with all the presenters today, because we put out a call out through the one of Jan's networks, and I was really inundated with responses, and I could have had a whole day forum on this topic, because so many people came back and told me about the great projects that they're doing. And it was a shame that we couldn't have them all on, but without keeping everyone here for hours on end, we just had to pick the 4 that we had today. But so I really appreciate Jan's help for creating those links across the state. And we've got, as I posted in the chat a little bit earlier, this is just the first of a 2-part series we're looking at on connection and participation. So next week, if you'd all like to come back, we'll be looking at projects that are happening in the Northeast region. And we've got 3 fantastic speakers there, from one from Charles Sturt University, Dr. Anna Horta, who's going to be looking at livability and walkability in Indigo Shire. We've got Jessica Wadeson from Latrobe City Council, and they're doing some fantastic work around reducing social isolation for people in Wodonga. And our third speaker is Leah Cooper, and Leah's an exercise physiologist who did some work around physical activity and social connection in the context of bushfire recovery, which is obviously a big issue for us up here. So 3 fantastic speakers, and hopefully you can come back for that. And we'll also have another forum for International Women's Day, which is on the 8th of March. It's a lunchtime forum that will look at housing older women. So obviously that's a really critical issue, as older women are one of the fastest growing population groups experiencing housing vulnerability and homelessness. So Sophie, would you mind just dropping the registration link in the chat again for those? So I do hope that everyone is able to come to one or both of our upcoming events, because it's really great to connect with everyone across the state and just hear what's happening in other regions of Victoria. So I'll leave it there. Thank you again for coming along today, and I really hope you enjoyed the session and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.